Hey everyone, many of you saw my recent takedown of Graham Hancock and his loser acolytes Dan Richards and Jimmy Corsetti. Needless to say, the cult of brainwashed pseudoarchaeology fanboys was not pleased, prompting some swift damage control from their heroes. Let's get a closer look. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to watch the great big pseudoarchaeology debunk before watching this video, as you'll be missing a lot of context otherwise. But to briefly summarize, Graham Hancock is the leader of an infantile fad where delusional idiots pretend that all archaeologists are corrupt liars, so that they can engage in ridiculous fantasies of super awesome lost civilizations based on zero evidence, because it makes them feel smart and special. I highlighted the idiocy of this movement based primarily on a debate between Hancock and archaeologist Flint Dibble that took place on Joe Rogan's show, won very cleanly by Flint, as well as the desperate parade of lies that has occurred since that debate in order to keep this grift afloat. As far as I'm aware, Graham himself hasn't mentioned me or my video, leaving that for his brainless minions, Dan Richards and Jimmy Corsetti, the bebop and rocksteady to Hancock's shredder, always managing to fumble every attempt to catch those pesky Ninja Turtles. Jimmy did very little, surprisingly, other than whining a little bit on Twitter. First, he whined about me understanding how medicine works and knowing that RFK is an idiot fraud just like Graham, and don't worry, he has his own extensive debunk coming very soon. Then he whined about Graham being called racist, which I didn't do, nor did Flint. Everyone just keeps pointing out that the sources he references are based in white supremacy, which they objectively are. Then, to top it off, he whines about failing to grasp how more people want to watch an accessible and humorous debunk of a popular topic than a tutorial on differential equations or Latin grammar. It really tickles me pink when haters accuse me of having a dead channel while I'm getting substantially more views than ever. It just proves more clearly than anything else imaginable that they have zero interest in engaging with reality. Oh, and calling me a bottom feeder when his entire identity is lying to make money on the internet is also pretty priceless. Oh yeah, he also blocked me. That screams courage. In short, the guy is just as lazy and dishonest and cowardly as he is stupid. But don't worry, we'll be back to eviscerate all of this clown's lies at a later date. Dan, on the other hand, felt compelled to do a bit more. He warned me of his intentions with the most pathetic YouTube comment I've ever seen, which simply said, "You finna to regret this vid, Dave," like a weirdo boomer dad trying to use the young people speak and failing miserably. Finna to? Really, Dan? So what did he have cooking exactly? That would be this. Professor Dave doesn't understand archaeology. Response. Of course, he's face-palming, as though I didn't repeatedly prove that he's a lying fraud. Then there's a teardrop next to my mouth instead of my eye, since he's an idiot. And Flint talks poop, because Dan says so. Immaculate. Anyway, this is a whopping hour and 40 minutes long, and it's packed to the brim with both lies and downright stupidity. So let's tear through this thing and really ruin Dan as much as possible, shall we?
Professor Dave explains. He's a little bit on the vitriolic side and kind of a... Just be forewarned. This video's... He's rotten, okay? He's just a rotten person. No,
Aw, am I such a mean man for exposing you as a pathetic lying fraud to nearly 1 million people? I'm sorry.
As I started cutting it up into pieces to respond to, it's like almost every single point had either some error in it, like glaring error in logic or glaring error in like actual facts.
Is that so? That's funny. I've heard that before.
I think every slide in his talk was wrong. Every slide was wrong.
I really wish you morons would learn your lesson at some point and just keep your dumb mouths shut. Okay, Dan, let's hear about all the ridiculous errors I made. I'm sure it won't just be you lying and getting everything wrong like always.
We can at least have an exchange without it seeming like one of us wants to kill the other person. But with this Professor Dave, oh boy.
Sounds like more of you just whining about how mean I am. All I did was expose you as a lying fraud. You're the one who told your viewers to rise up and murder archaeology professors, remember?
Students would put their teachers on mock trials and thump on their heads and even unalive some of them. I'm not going to do it. But I do know that a lot of you out there will do it.
Want to drop the bullshit victim complex and start talking about actual science? This is science, and archaeologists are scientists who follow a rigid empirical methodology.
No, that's not how archaeology works. They play fast and loose with the facts. But I'll bring receipts so we don't have to argue about it.
You don't have any receipts, dumbass. You just sell a pathetic story about how every single archaeologist in the world is a lying fraud to brainwash people into ignoring the fact that you're a lying fraud. Flat earthers pretend that every astronomer in the world is a lying fraud too. You're no different than a flat earther.
Later in the video, Professor Dave highlights the carbon dating of the Great Pyramid and the other 4th Dynasty edifices. He puts it on the screen, and he uses the data gathered by the late 90s expeditions financed by David Koch. Now, this expedition, and the other expedition financed by the Edgar Cayce Foundation about a decade earlier, both show the entire 4th Dynasty to be carbon dated between 150 to 250 years older than the written records state that they are. But the written records of ancient Egypt, the King's List, this is considered to be some of the most robust written records that we have of those times. So how do they reconcile this? Well, what they do is they assert, without evidence, that, there was some old wood that the Egyptians, for the entire 4th Dynasty, they just gathered old wood, and that's what they used. And they had a big burn maybe, and used that to get the ash for all of the mortar that they made for the next entire dynasty. And so you'd assume they have a burn pit or some writing saying that that's not it at all. There is no rigorous freaking empirical shit going on here. All there is these guys have a book and hard data that disagrees with that book.
Oh goody, the idiot has made an actual empirical claim. Now we get to show how dumb he is with real science. Now, in case you weren't familiar with anything he just said, don't worry, most people aren't, especially his idiot followers. So let's get some background information covered. In 2001, Bonanni et al. Published radiocarbon dates from the pyramids at Giza, and those dates proposed a time frame that was a few hundred years earlier than archaeologists expected, based on their assumed calibration of historical king lists. Dan calls these king lists the most robust written records that we have of those times. This alone is enough to disqualify Dan as a complete moron with zero knowledge of archaeology. These lists aren't immaculate compilations with precise dates and lengths of rule. They're all fragmentary, requiring calibration of their discrepancies and overlaps with one another, and with other evidence like inscriptions on monuments and astronomical observations. They're not robust at all. He just blindly asserts that they are. In reality, historians are forced to make assumptions about how long reigns are and extrapolate back from well-attested historical periods in the first millennium BCE. The further back you go, the more uncertainty there is with the assumed dates. Dan has never seen these lists or any other archaeological artifact. He can't read them. He can't interpret them. He hasn't even read literature from professionals interpreting them. He just calls them robust for no reason and then moves on to the next lie. This is all he does. But it gets much worse. Here's that Bonanni paper from 2001 that presented and explained the discrepancy between radiocarbon dates and historical dates for the pyramids. As you can see, they very clearly suggested that old wood was burned to create the mortar for the pyramids, which left the charcoal that was dated. Radiocarbon dating returns the date that organic material was alive, which stops being the case when a tree is chopped down. Wood from trees can be used and reused. You probably have a wooden chair in your house right now that's been a chair and not a tree for a very long time. Furthermore, the interior of a tree trunk might be centuries older than the exterior, and this shows up in the dating. So the very obvious conclusion is that the wood used in the construction of the pyramid is a bit older than the pyramid. Did it return a date for the wood that is younger than the pyramid? No. Did it return a date that is several thousand years older than the pyramid? No. About 200 years, which is perfectly in line with normal tree growth and repeated wood usage. Not only is this so mind-numbingly obvious of a conclusion to make, but it's also well known to archaeologists, who are indeed more rigidly empirical than idiots like Dan can even comprehend. That's why they prefer to use short-lived species for radiocarbon dates, such as animal remains or seeds from annual plants, rather than long-lived wood that might be reused, as it allows for greater precision in dating. Does it get even worse than that for Dan? Of course it does. Here's another paper from 2009, reanalysis of the chronological discrepancies obtained by the Old and Middle Kingdom monuments. Gee, do you think there's some newer data in here that Dan is ignoring? You bet there is. As you can see, they recalibrated Bonanni's radiocarbon dates using a different statistical approach to prioritize samples from short-lived species rather than long-lived trees. And would you look at that, they match quite a bit better with the historical and archaeological timelines. So it sounds like it was simply a matter of getting some initial data, and then over only a few years, refining our methods to get better data, which corroborates the other knowledge we have. It's almost like it's a perfect example of how empirical science works, something Dan knows precisely dick about, and just talks out of his ass on the internet to trick gullible idiots into ignoring. Funny how that works, huh? Any thoughts, Dan?
And they dismiss the hard data in favor of what the book says. Now, I want you to think for a second and see if you can draw any parallels with that in the real world. Just put your head to it for a minute and see if anything comes up that you might think, I know some other people who reject hard data in favor of what's written in a book. Is that rigorous scientific empirical? Dave? Insert your insult thingy here. I'm not going to bother.
Yes, I will gladly insult you, because you deserve it. You're the moron ignoring all the data I just showed you in favor of the shitty books that frauds like Graham publish. You're the religious zealot preaching willful ignorance. You're the moron who has never done any research, never truly read any research, and doesn't even know what scientific research entails. And you've just proven to everyone that you're specifically dishonest as well, or you would have addressed the 2009 paper that recalibrates the radiocarbon data. You're pointless. There was a time when pseudoarchaeology was limited to ancient aliens on the History Channel.
By the year 2000, Fingerprints of the Gods had sold millions of copies. Millions of copies. By the time Ancient Aliens launched in 2009, Graham Hancock was the number one Atlantis bro on the planet. He was well known as the number one alternate historian on the planet, hands down, by a country mile. And this stuff was popular enough that he was selling number one best-selling books. Multiple number one bestsellers. But you're going to pretend that it just showed up in Ancient Aliens times? Well, of course, because you didn't really care to look any of this up. You just make up this backstory because it's like just an RPG, and Dave's just over there going, it would be a cool backstory for this guy if I was just to make up a charlatan. It's just like...
It's so cute how riled up he gets, isn't it? Dan takes offense to me explaining how Graham is a charlatan who wrote some crappy books and then got famous from the Ancient Aliens bullshit, and his response is to bring up all the crappy books he wrote. Hey, Dan, pointing at his books full of lies doesn't do anything to refute the fact that he's a charlatan who wrote a bunch of books full of lies. It doesn't matter if a lot of idiots like you bought them prior to Ancient Aliens. That's when he became more of a household name. End of story. And it continues to be hilarious watching idiots like you try to distance Graham from Ancient Aliens because you know how unbelievably stupid it is, even though I pointed out in my previous video, which of course you ignore, that Graham wrote dogshit books like Mars Mystery, which are flawlessly aligned with all the Ancient Aliens bullshit. He's always been a grifter who peddles the same narrative in different flavors. Need more proof? Here's a clip of him talking to Art Bell about his Mars bullshit.
And to say, well, this absolutely proves that there's nothing of interest in terms of artificial structures on Mars. I mean, there seems to me, certainly in the press in Britain, I can't speak for the American press because I haven't seen it, to have been an incredibly hasty and almost relieved reaction along the lines of, oh yes, all those Mars people were just cranks after all, and now NASA has proved it, so we can all rest quietly. I think that Mars has something to tell us about the cataclysmic history of the Earth. And this is why the monuments on Mars, in inverted commas, of course, the alleged monuments on Mars, are so interesting to me, because taken in context with the cataclysmic history of the planet.
Do you see now how all Graham did was pivot from Mars to Atlantis once he realized nobody was biting? Dan, I'm asking you a question. Do you see how Graham was precisely the pointless Ancient Aliens grifting douchebag you're pretending he isn't?
While atheism is not a religion, the psychological things that religions tend to use to manipulate and control people still exist in atheists. The same psychological linchpins and underpinnings and all that kind of crap, whatever the word you want to use for it is You can still manipulate an atheist with things like appeal to authority.
Science is not an appeal to authority, and you don't have to be an atheist to accept science. Are you auditioning for a spot at Discovery Institute, Danny boy? Are you really going to start a completely unnecessary rant about atheism just to trigger your brainwashed flock?
There are parts of atheism that are very religious-like, and one of them is the way that it treats people that are in lab coats like they're men of the cloth. And Professor Dave is one of those.
Yes, I'm just a member of the Church of Scientism. I blindly believe anything that any scientist says, just like religious people blindly believe raving preachers. It's not like scientists publish their research for anyone to read and verify. Can you make it any more clear that you're a pointless science-illiterate troll with nothing to say? This is all you have. Empty rhetoric. Every time you try to talk about science, like with the radiocarbon dating, you just completely fumble it. You know that you have no idea what you're talking about, so you instead have to resort to the tactic of demonizing science as a whole and brainwashing people into associating education and expertise with dishonesty and corruption. Because you're a fraud. That's what frauds do, instill their flock with a knee-jerk Pavlovian response towards actual experts so that they will be biased against actual empirical science and blindly swallow your lies.
And if you can't restrain your ego some, when you're like reading things that you disagree with, maybe don't be a scientist, or at least don't be one that goes and talks on the internet and ruins the public face of science. Because let's be clear, emotional blah and science do not mix.
Yes, stop freaking out on the internet and training gullible idiots to deny an entire field of science in order to service your own ego. I see that projection is one of your toxic traits, Dan. Flint Dibble. He is an archaeological scientist and ancient historian who specializes in environmental archaeology from the Stone Age to the medieval period across the Mediterranean, with a focus on the ancient Greek world.
Well, now you know where Dave got his data from. The archaeologist that doesn't study pyramids or, Turkey or ancient Egypt. He studies seeds and food and dick bones.
Hey dumbass, your entire grift relies on repeatedly villainizing Flint Dibble. Of course, I proved about 100 separate times in my previous video that Flint knows exactly what he's talking about, and he shat all over Graham for 4 hours in that debate with fact after fact. But it's much more important to point out that Dan is baselessly pretending that I'm putting any individual scholar on some kind of pedestal. Who wrote that paper recalibrating the carbon dating of the pyramids that I used to ruin your script of lies, Dan? Was it Flint? Oh, it wasn't Flint? It was some other archaeologists whose work you absolutely can't refute and probably can't even read in the first place? So why are you whining about Flint over and over again like he fucked your wife? Oh, right, because he's the one who humiliated the grifting fraud that you put on a pedestal, Graham Hancock.
Even though he is regurgitating things that he may or may not understand well, and information that he selectively gathered in order to win a debate, let's be clear, which is not exactly a very scientific way to gather the information, is it?
Selectively gathered? You mean Flint gathered a mountain of data that specifically proves Graham is a grifting fraud? I'm pretty sure that's exactly how you win a scientific debate, dumbass, by presenting scientific data to prove the other person wrong. Do you and Jimmy check for Flint under your bed before you go to sleep at night? I know that's what flat earthers do for me, so I guess I'm in good company.
Furthermore, you've poisoned the well by stating Plato's Atlantis narrative is fictional, something that cannot be proven and is debatable. Plato was trying to make a point, trying to convince his contemporaries of an idea.
You can't prove it's made up, you stupid jerk. Any made up bullshit that makes me feel special is real until you prove it isn't. That's totally how the burden of proof works. Same with unicorns and leprechauns. You haven't looked in every single cubic meter of the entire universe, so you can't say for sure that unicorns and leprechauns don't exist.
I kind of do like science. I kind of treat the scientific method as like a way of thinking that you can actually use to skeptically interrogate the universe, to quote this guy that I wouldn't dare put on a pulpit, but I would say he had some pretty good ideas. Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah, Sagan would spit in your face, Dan. In fact, plenty of people compare Sagan to your nemesis Flint. Doesn't that burn a little? Instead of just pretending to love science, maybe go learn some for the first time in your life, eh, kiddo?
These guys have been going after Graham for decades. When he finally started openly, punching back, it's a war on archaeology itself. My God, Time to rally the defenses. It's almost like a war on Christmas. You better get everybody together. It's a war on tradition.
What the fuck is this pageantry? Graham made a dogshit TV show full of lies where he slanders real archaeologists in every other sentence. So archaeologists wrote a letter asking Netflix to recategorize the show. Oh my god, poor Graham, what a victim. It's a pseudoscientific rampage in which he proposes that a highly technologically advanced global Ice Age civilization was destroyed in a cataclysmic flood and is thus easily connected to the myth of Atlantis.
He does not posit that they were highly technologically advanced. That's a straw man.
No, it isn't. He proposed it so many times that it's practically his mantra. He kept it vague for a long time because he knew he had no evidence whatsoever to back up the claim, which is why he walked it back so hard during the debate with Flint.
Technologically, Graham does have a pretty good smoking gun. He's got some maps that show longitude with better accuracy than we should have, because it takes two working clocks that keep good time in order to get longitude accurately. Yet we have some very old maps with good longitude, maps that predate timepieces that were said to have been gathered from earlier source maps.
Sorry, which maps have such precise longitude? Also, to calculate longitude accurately, you need technology like metallurgy to build a chronometer. Wouldn't that be some of the technology that Graham is alluding to? The precise technology that has been conclusively shown through ice cores to not have existed during the Ice Age?
That the only professional cartographers to have ever reviewed these maps did so a while ago, like 50, 60 years ago, and they came to the conclusion that they did in fact show Antarctica and that they did in fact have good longitude. Now, you can disagree with that.
Yeah, I will, since it's not true. This is the Piri Reis map from 1513, which Graham claims with zero evidence is a copy of an Ice Age map because it shows the real landform of Antarctica ice-free, and therefore necessarily ancient. This has been debunked 100 times. First, Antarctica has been covered in ice for at least 15 million years. That's not just way longer than humans have been around, it predates any hominid species. By a lot. But more importantly, from the 15th to the 18th centuries, cartographers commonly included a hypothetical continent, Terra Australis, in the southern hemisphere, which they believed was needed to balance the land masses in the northern hemisphere, whatever that means. Look at this map from 1594. That's what this huge thing is. A made-up continent. In the 1770s, James Cook reached the Antarctic coast, so that's when our world maps started to get more accurate at those most southern latitudes. Again, on the Piri Reis map, when this coastline takes a sharp turn like this is meant to be Terra Australis, an imaginary continent made up out of thin air by Ptolemy. People who know a lot about old maps know these things, Dan. Stop pretending you have a clue.
But the worst part is the accusations of racism. Graham is not claiming indigenous people could not do it without white people. In fact, he believes the Atlantis civilization most came from Africa or South America, far from Europe.
False. Graham repeatedly refers to white-skinned folks arriving in South America in Fingerprint of the Gods, which means specifically not indigenous. Doesn't that sound exactly like what these archaeologists said and what I said? Didn't you say that was your super favorite book, Dan? I guess you forgot. So maybe stop whining about these bogus accusations that are just accurate portrayals of what Graham says.
Malta. There's all those temples on Malta. Malta is also Honkyville, right? All the white people's in Malta. But, I mean, what? Because we don't have written records for Gigantea, Graham used it on Ancient Apocalypse. And this is the stuff that you guys conveniently ignore.
Honkyville? Malta became a British colony in 1813. What is it that you even think you're trying to say, Dan? This is all about colonialism. You're pointing out a concrete example of British colonialism and then refusing to acknowledge that this precise colonialism is behind many of the narratives that frauds like Graham have modernized for cash. Good God, you're dumb. It's not controlling the narrative to push back on fraudulent claims, because science is not a narrative, it's an empirical process.
Archaeology is not an empirical process. There are empirical parts of it. But by and large, if you're using empirical in the traditional evidence-based sense, hard data-based sense, it's not empirical.
Thank you for admitting that you're a fucking moron with no idea what science is or what archaeologists do. Excavation, dating, analysis, it's all done using principles of physics, chemistry, geology, and other physical sciences. So it's just as rigorously empirical as those sciences. You simply have zero experience in the field. How else would you like to humiliate yourself?
When Darwin looked at those finches, right, this was not empirical. This is not like, this is how it is, which is evidenced much later when so much work had been done by this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got DNA, and well, some of these guys that we thought were related aren't, and some of these guys that we thought weren't related are. Oops.
Who could possibly guess that Dan knows even less about biology than he does about archaeology? I could. Darwin was not empirical. His extensive series of observations, experimentation, and collection of mountains of empirical data from the natural world was not empirical. Conducting countless experiments to test hypotheses about plant and animal behavior is not empirical. His meticulous documentation of countless flora and fauna is not empirical. His construction of the theory of natural selection, which is now the cornerstone of evolutionary biology, is not empirical. There's a reason that Darwin is mentioned alongside people like Newton and Einstein in lists of the greatest scientific minds of all time. It's because of all the empirical science he did. This is why people make fun of you, Dan. You're absolutely shameless in your ability to open your dumb mouth and spew complete horseshit regarding topics you know literally nothing about. Get a life. In the 19th century, we invented the steam engine, railroads, the telegraph, the telephone, cars, light bulbs, photography, the cotton gin, and steel. That's some good shit. Is that what you're talking about, Graham? You think some civilization from 12,000 years ago had stuff like that? Then why can't you pull a 14,000-year-old steel beam out of the ground, Chief?
Graham has changed his position over time, something that science also does, but when science does it, you know, it's scientific method. When Graham does it, it's backpedaling, but...
Yeah, it is backpedaling, and you're also blatantly contradicting what you said earlier in this video.
He does not posit that they were highly technologically advanced. That's a straw man. Graham has changed his position over time.
So which is it, asshole? Has he never made the claim, or has he changed his position? You're so bad at this, it's hilarious.
When a scientist has been heavily accused of lying, maybe investigate that shit before you just like go blah and defend that scientist, because there might be a reason the scientist was accused of lying.
Yeah, I looked into it, and I concluded that Flint ruined your hero Graham in front of millions of people using mountains of real science. So your whole crew just invented the narrative that he's a liar out of thin air, and have been desperately pushing it ever since so you can keep grifting. That's why I'm here ruining all of you assholes, by showing as many people as possible what pathetic lying frauds you all are. Want to cry more about it?
We know what happens when they get emotional about things. Planck's principle is very clear on that. Max Planck, and he's the guy that was a Nobel Prize winning theoretical physicist, and he's basically, his principle can be summed up that science advances one funeral at a time, not one discovery at a time. And that's a sad, sad thing, but it is true. Human ego is a big deal. So the combating of that is kind of imperative.
Yes, we know, Dan. We know because we've heard it from Graham about 1 billion times. Sometimes science changes, therefore any bullshit I want to be true must be true because I say so. I'm surprised you can speak so clearly with Graham's dick in your mouth.
Dave doesn't understand this because Dave is very egotistical and very ego-driven, to the point where he really doesn't, borderline scientifically illiterate, and he certainly does not understand how to apply the thinking of science and then put it into the real world.
Yeah, I'm so science illiterate. Having multiple science-related degrees and teaching science for over a decade is totally possible when you're science illiterate. I guess when I teach organic chemistry at the university level, I'm just making up gibberish like Terrence Howard, eh, Dan? If only I could be an uneducated electrician like you, then I would understand science so super good. What a loser.
Gbekli Tepe's Pillar 43 has a very large body of scholarly work from a charlatan, I'm sure you'll say, but he is an archaeoastronomer. That's a whole field of study, by the way, Dave. You should probably look that one up. Archaeoastronomy. It's a real field of study, Dave. You should probably go look into that a little bit before you keep flapping your gums. But anyway, Dr. Martin Sweatman, he's got a whole bunch of work on Göbekli Tepe's Pillar 43. There's also the Orion-Giza correlation, and there's talk about the temples at Malta, although I personally believe the temples at Malta were more oriented with crux and more in line with, the traditional timeline. But
it's so adorable when he pretends to know things. He's responding to me pointing out that Graham has zero evidence for even his backpedaled claim that all this 19th century technology is just pure knowledge of astronomy, which of course is true. He brings up Martin Sweatman, who is not an archaeologist, and some claims that Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe confirms Graham's bullshit comet event. First, Sweatman assumes that the animals we use to represent constellations were the same more than 10,000 years ago, which is totally idiotic. He also ignores the animals on all the other pillars that have nothing to do with constellations. The animals on the pillars show a clear pattern. They were used as an expression of community and identity. They have nothing to do with constellations.
Now, the way that Dave ignores the problems with the Clovis First debacle, it's disgusting. He knows, because he watched the video, that Tom Dillahay had his life basically threatened because of this.
And plus, politically, from time to time, there were some difficult moments. At my home institution later on, when I left Chile, a letter was sent to a dean with anonymous signatures of about 24, 25 people saying this guy doesn't even have a PhD, a lie, of course. You should fire him from the university for what he's doing, and so on.
Oh my gosh, some people wrote a letter about how he should be fired? The horror! Kind of like how you and Jimmy repeatedly encourage your idiot followers to do exactly that to Flint. And sorry, writing a letter is having his life basically threatened now? The word basically is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, eh, Dan? Jesus Christ, you are beyond shameless. You're whining about behavior that you specifically commit on a regular basis and to a much worse degree, while you clutch your pearls when people expose rhetoric from your camp that is objectively based in racism. Everyone is awful but you, right, Dan? I'm pretty sure you're a sociopath.
Say you called up John Hoops University and you're like, man, that John Hoops guy in your fucking anthropology department, that guy, blah, 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 blah. I am all for doing like properly organized activism in those regards, a fucking letter to their employer and stuff, but like a mad dash of 5,000 people sending hate emails is never going to do anything.
Well, you'd be surprised if someone gets to work on Monday morning and they have 5,000 emails to read. They're gonna make sure that stops.
And we already went over this. Graham claimed Jacques Cinq-Mars had his career destroyed over this, and I used his obituary to prove that it objectively wasn't. He worked all the way up until retirement age. So go ahead and show your little video, Dan. Fewer and fewer people are falling for this bullshit every day.
It's anti-science, Dave. You are anti-science, Dave, and I'll give you some examples as to why. Your type of thinking, Graham is telling you why the Clovis First debacle happened. He's explaining it to you, why these things happen, and you ignore it.
I don't ignore it. Neither does Flint. I'm pointing out how frauds like you and Graham deliberately distort it to push a narrative. And I proved that you're doing that. That a handful of archaeologists were arrogant and dismissive about a particular discovery is not an indictment of the entire field and history of archaeology, nor does it validate any of the blatant lies you tell. Cry forever about it.
He absolutely had his career ruined. Jacques Cinq-Mars lost his funding and was moved to museum curator instead of field archaeologist. He loved being in the field. He actually found the Bluefish Caves when he was scouting in the off-season, looking for places to excavate when it was time to excavate again. He loved being in the field. And they put him at a desk.
Oh, look, you're doing more of the thing I just proved that you're doing. He wasn't put at a desk. He continued to excavate until retirement. Did you even read the obituary I showed you? Testing and excavation, research at caves, research in the Yukon. You even showed this to your idiot followers. You are spewing horseshit that is debunked by the clip you're responding to. How is anyone this stupid?
It's not like Yanaguni being potentially man-made is like going to make Graham's books or Graham's position right. However, it acknowledging that it could be the case, which most geologists think that it is natural, but there are some geologists that think it's man-made.
Some geologists think Yanaguni is man-made. Some? Which ones are those, Dan? Did you mean one? Wolf Wickman, who Graham misrepresents as saying it could be man-made when he actually said the precise opposite? So, actually zero? And did you forget even Graham's pseudo-geologist former friend Robert Schock, who also debunked this idea?
No, Wolf Wickman is not imaginary. As a matter of fact, the Wikipedia page on Yanaguni mentions him, Dave. Yes, Dave, Wikipedia is a better source of knowledge than your video. Good job.
You mean the Wikipedia page that mentions him in order to specifically confirm the thing I said? Great work, dumbass.
In what they have studied, yes, we can say there's no evidence for an advanced civilization.
Graham is speaking of the Amazon rainforest, the submerged continental shelves, and the Sahara. The way that this clip keeps getting bandied about is extremely disingenuous because Graham and Joe make it very clear exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, they're talking about how there's no evidence whatsoever supporting Graham's dumb stories. Anywhere. In the whole world. At all. Watching you asshats do mental gymnastics about this quote for the past year is really hilarious. He is admitting there is no evidence supporting his claims, yet all of his shows and books and conversations focus on what archaeologists have studied, presenting the data in a way that is suggestive of it being evidence for his claims. That's why this debate was so devastating. Graham kept bringing up geological sites devoid of any archaeology, like Yanaguni and Bimini Road, and Flint kept shitting all over Graham's bogus claims about them. And when pressed by Joe to talk more about actual archaeological sites, he just crumbled, desperately pivoting to whining about Flint's influence in the media or some other bullshit deflection.
Just this that we're looking at here?
No, there's much more. Past it, but we just don't have time to go there. I'm actually giving a presentation on Flint's influence on media and culture.
Graham clearly pretends that there is evidence for his claims when he's speaking to the general public or anyone incapable of fact-checking him. In the presence of an archaeologist, he just crumbles and admits there's no evidence, leaving losers like Dan to do the damage control, just like you do with the racism stuff. No, you just reference white supremacist sources and also objectively spew rhetoric that fuels racism.
Now, this is where I get frustrated as fuck, because archaeology itself was built on white supremacy. White people traveled to foreign lands to procure ancient artifacts, and cataloging those stolen treasures led to the study of cultures being looted and their predecessors.
Yeah, that's why modern archaeologists denounce those practices and have moved past them to do their research in an ethical way. Why can't you do the same and admit that Graham references sources that are rooted in white supremacy, kiddo? You're basically making my point for me. Archaeology used to be racist. Now let's not be. Let's return remains of indigenous people to their descendants. Let's repatriate artifacts. Let's revise histories that had previously been biased by past white supremacy. Let's improve the previously colonial nature of the field. These are all things that are now part of any undergraduate archaeology education, and things which the vast majority of archaeologists take very seriously, a fact which is not undermined by bringing up a handful of examples to the contrary. But you wouldn't know that, would you, Dan, since you've never studied archaeology and don't actually know anything about the field. Yet he refuses to acknowledge what's known about the sources he references that are associated with white supremacy. It's just embarrassing.
It is not known that Quetzalcoatl having a beard and pale skin was something that it was invented by the Spanish.
No, we do know that for sure. That's what was proven in the clip you just played, where Flint showed an image from before the arrival of Spanish colonists. Earlier depictions of Quetzalcoatl do not depict a white-skinned individual. Any of them. Ever. It's settler colonial white supremacist bullshit, and the reason we keep having to talk about it is because you keep bringing it up. Just accept it and move on with your life.
He made a post on Twitter falsely suggesting that I taught with the ancestral remains of indigenous people at Dartmouth College. Over the next couple of days, he had conversations with several people, both YouTubers and my colleagues, who calmly explained that I study and teach about archaeological animal remains, not human remains.
I showed you very little of this because it only takes about 10 seconds to see that Dan is just a shithead con man and internet troll. But all of this harassment towards Flint was getting Dan the attention he so desperately craved, so he just went even harder with it.
Now, I made a mistake. Flint apparently worked through Zoom or the like when he worked at Dartmouth, but it's really funny to me how it turns into, Dan said that I was doing this instead of focusing on the reason that I brought it up to begin with.
The reason you brought it up is that you're a lying piece of shit troll who lies on the internet for a living. You were corrected about this lie on Twitter numerous times prior to making your video, which repeated those lies. You're backpedaling now because you got exposed for it on a video with a shit ton of views instead of a Twitter thread. Whoops.
Were some key points that you had discussed, one of them being the amount of shipwrecks.
This is all centered around one figure about a number of shipwrecks that Flint got slightly wrong. It was an enormous number rather than an even more enormous number. That's it.
What? The only evidence of Flint being dishonest is the shipwreck thing, and that's just a decimal point? Mm-hmm. What about the part when he lies about whether or not he implied Hancock was racist or was spreading racism or white supremacy or whatever?
Thank you for confirming that this was the only thing Flint got wrong. You could have said something about the science, but you didn't because you can't. You're just whining yet again about accusations of racism, which for the 1,000th time never happened. You can't find a single clip of Flint or me accusing Graham himself of being racist because it never happened. It's about the white supremacist sources he references, and calling Jimmy racist is no problem since he is. I showed tweets of his using anti-Semitic dog whistles like triple parentheses for the purpose of identifying and targeting Jewish people online. So you can all keep clutching your pearls, nobody cares.
What about the part when he lies about how we detect metallurgy in ice cores? What about the part when he lies about plant fertilization? What about...
You're laughing nervously because you know you're lying. Flint didn't lie about those things. You're pretending he did because you're a lying fraud. And I specifically explained how you lie about those things when I covered the Rogan episode with you and Jimmy. I explained how you can't read any of the irrelevant papers you cite, and how fertilized strains would display genetic evidence of domestication. I explained how you misrepresented an ice core scientist to push your narrative. All you do is insist over and over again that Flint lied by simply repeating the same lies that have been debunked multiple times. It's pathetic.
I know that you think Joe's just some dumb dude, bro, that's like, conspiracy theory. But the fact of the matter is that Joe is pretty concerned with the honesty and integrity of the people that he platforms.
You're a dog.
He also ignored the fact that the genetic bottleneck of a domestication event would show up in subsequent feral strains, so we'd be able to observe an earlier domestication event from a lost civilization, even if fertilization later took place.
Once again, you didn't do any research. Rice does show a bottleneck, but it's not very pronounced. It's a lot harder to pin down due to the multiple genetic pathways for seed shattering, which is the primary indicator in rice of it being domesticated.
Okay, so you actually did decide to address this, and all you did was flash some paper titles that prove me right, and add some text acknowledging that these papers prove me right?
There are multiple pathways for genetic pathways for rice to shatter its seeds, or to shatter them less slowly, I should say. And so, being that that's the first thing we look for is the inhibition of these, we actually see in some species of rice that this has happened twice. That it's been stopped and started and stopped again, almost like it was domesticated, fertilized, and domesticated a second time. Now, that could be wrong, but to just assert that it is wrong, my friend, read the papers that I sourced in my videos on this stuff, man. The fucking science papers, right? Did you read them?
Yeah, I did. That's how I know you're full of shit, remember? By looking at the papers you referenced and showing that none of them estimate the time required for rice to go feral like you pretended they did. So you either didn't read them or are just lying about them. Man, you're bad at this.
Of course not. You just read the title, you look for a little piece that debunked what you, and you post it on the screen and run with it.
You mean exactly what you did 15 seconds ago and not what I did at all? Holy shit, man, I've never seen anyone project this hard in my entire life. You can't have an older civilization on top of a newer one. It's called the law of superposition. Anyone who knows the first thing about archaeology knows this, which excludes Jimmy.
Now, he's talking about Balbeck here, the site I mentioned earlier, and Dave is, he's certain that it's Roman, and even though it didn't use the Roman foot, which is pretty much an almost ubiquitous feature in Roman construction. And there's another issue with the parts of Balbeck that are questioned. It's not the entire site, by the way. I've got a video on it. You can go check out if you'd like. But the thing that's important to mention here is where he talks about this broken column drum being found under the foundation, and that's not exactly accurate, which is why you see him using... That's an AI answer, isn't it? Yeah. Good job, Dave. Totally not lazy. The thing is, it was found a long time ago in the enclosure, and it's hard to say whether or not it was under or not because the records are a little shit.
Wow, the records are a little shit. Very convincing. And boo, AI. Dave does science with AI. Okay, asshole, here's the quote from Kalayan. The engraved drawing on the trilithon and the related problems, 1969. A part of a drum of a column similar in dimension to the columns of the Temple of Jupiter is used as a block in the foundation under the trilithon. In the absence, to our knowledge, of a second monument with similar dimensions of columns in Balbeck, one can conclude that the drum was a discarded one and that the columns were already cut or were in process of shaping when the foundations of the trilithon had started. This clearly shows that the Roman temple had started construction before the trilithon was placed there. Whoops.
It's actually a good way of kind of introducing somebody to white superiority, is you'll be like, hey, what do you think of this book? And then you give them a copy of that. And if they agree with it, then that means maybe they're open up to reading maybe something like March of the Titans or what have you later on. But it's a nice little intro to racialism.
Jesus fucking Christ, Dave, this is pathetic, okay? I almost didn't want to put this part in the video because I hate how much I'm having to talk about this, but here's the deal. Some people are going to fall for this shit, so I need to explain it in a way that even the simplistic will understand, Dave. No matter what ideology you espouse, there will be a percentage of those people that are insane.
Yeah, you hate talking about it so much. That's why you never shut the fuck up about it. Thank you for very cleanly proving my point that Graham's rhetoric references white supremacy, so white supremacists latch on to it. You've repeatedly claimed that Graham's rhetoric has nothing to do with white supremacy, even in this video, and yet here you are backpedaling and admitting that the connection is there. Just don't worry about a few nutty people with a screw loose. They don't prove anything, especially not the thing they specifically prove. You are magnificently demonstrating the exact thing Flint said during the debate, which is why he told Graham he should separate himself from the white supremacists who cite him.
I did say it, and I said that there's this history of this idea which has been used by white supremacists. And that's an issue. Right. And I would like Graham to separate himself from that history in a stronger way, because he goes around the world to different cultures and he claims that instead of their ancestors building this stuff, it was done by his civilization. They were the ones that taught people around the world how to do that.
That you are responding to the precise clip that proves you wrong and doing nothing but blustering like a smug little bitch is precisely why people crap on you, Dan. Get some humility.
This is like well known, man. This is like if you're not going to find this on Wikipedia. Wikipedia will tell you basically that Gbekli Tepe did change how we look at hunter-gatherers and the advancement of human society, but it won't tell you that the history of Graham Hancock's side of things, and understandably so. But if you're going to make a video on that, you're going to have to dig a little bit, my friend.
No, I don't need to do any digging to realize why Wikipedia doesn't mention Graham Hancock with regards to Gbekli Tepe. It's because he's a fraud that has nothing to do with any archaeological site of any kind and doesn't matter whatsoever to the field of archaeology.
You know what's far more out there is suggesting that it was a tomb for the pharaohs. Like, they've never...
Flint Dibble.
Yeah, they have never found... Never mind, they never found a mummy in any Egyptian pyramid ever.
This is such an easily Googleable and objectively false statement gentlemen, that it's impossible to treat them as anything but piece of shit trolls. Sarcophagi, human remains, parts of mummies, funerary goods, and more. This is so extensively well documented, obviously in the primary literature, but even in museums that everyone has access to. Who the fuck is their audience here that they just eat up crap like this? The pyramids are tombs. Get over it.
And now look at the list that he shows on the screen. None of the pharaohs were found. None of the royal burials are in the big pyramids. There's a couple of the mud brick piles of shit, and yeah, we found bodies in a couple of those. But when they opened sealed royal sarcophagus found in the tomb of Heterophores, the sarcophagus was empty.
Dan's amazing response to me debunking possibly the dumbest thing Jimmy has ever said is to admit point blank that mummies have been found in pyramids and then whine about how there was an empty sarcophagus that one time. This one soundbite alone tells you everything you need to know about Dan Richards, that he doesn't give two shits about facts. He couldn't care less about reality. He's just saying and doing anything he can to keep his little community of grifting losers afloat. To say that pyramids are not tombs is as dumb as flat earthers saying gravity doesn't exist. It's as dumb as creationists saying evolution doesn't happen. It's a complete disavowal of an entire field of science. Once again, I flashed just a few pieces of a very, very long list of literally millions of artifacts and remains that have been found in Egyptian pyramids. We find human skeletal remains. We find sarcophagi and other burial goods. The ancient Egyptians tell us that the pyramids are tombs in their own texts. We see the clear evolution from burial structures called mastabas all the way to the largest pyramids. And finally, referencing a specific sarcophagus that was empty does nothing but show how clueless Dan is, since he doesn't even know that false burial chambers exist because they were safeguarding the remains against looting, which happened all the time. But just ignore all of that and keep spewing your script, eh, asshole?
I don't know if I'll ever respond to Dave again. Probably not. I mean, we'll see. But I'm not really into the just open insult stuff with no, like, he didn't say anything of substance. Like, literally, the only reason I'm making it is because so many people expected it and because he's got such a big following that it's just like, okay, dude, I gotta point out. But
yes, you cobbled together a turd sandwich of a video because hundreds of people were crapping on you for being a lying fraud, and you had to do some damage control to maintain a portion of your flock. Stop pretending otherwise.
Professor Dave Explains is hands down the laziest, probably least cordial, definitely rudest, and kind of dumb. I mean, maybe not dumb, but borderline scientifically illiterate. He don't quite get how science works. He's 60% religious fundamentalist, 40% skeptic. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Oh, I'm having a great day. Yours might not go so well when people watch this video, though. I will say, the ego on these frauds never ceases to amaze me, going around and accusing educated scientists and science communicators of not knowing how science works, when he's never done an ounce of science in his entire fucking life. Dan is like that asshole shouting insults at the screen in the sports bar as though he can play football better than NFL players, when he can't even throw the ball or jog 20 feet without gasping. In summary, I can count on one hand the scientific points Dan attempted to make in a video that's nearly 2 hours long, and most of those were just repeating lies that I debunked in my first video. The rest of it, most of which I didn't even bother including, is just a bunch of whining, appeals to emotion, and making sad puppy dog faces to get his fans to keep believing his lies. This is why this video is called Dan Richards is a Pointless Troll. That word describes him better than grifter or charlatan because he's not even really profiting off of this stuff that much. He probably pays a few bills with AdSense revenue, but other than that, he's just an errand boy for his taskmaster Graham, and that really is the most pathetic thing of all. Of course, when not responding to people who actually know what they're talking about, Dan makes even bolder claims, hoping that nobody educated will notice. Here's his most recent video talking about Egyptology, easily the dumbest video he's ever made.
A little over a month ago, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced that it had found a new tomb in Saqqara. The most impressive thing to come out of the find, in my opinion, would just happen to be the fact that we are getting two different stories from official sources on the nature of this find.
Okay, Dan, what are the two sources and how do they contradict each other about the nature of this find? Make sure you actually have something intelligent to say and aren't just completely humiliating yourself by misunderstanding everything in the most embarrassing way imaginable.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the feature on this site that the media is the most hyped about is that large granite door to nowhere. The tomb had the statues of the pharaoh Djoser and his wife and 10 daughters inside the tomb. These statues were presumably moved there before they finished burying User-Efre, according to Egyptologists, and Djoser was from the 3rd dynasty, User-Efre and Userkaf, the 5th dynasty. Now, when this site was first discovered, Egyptologist Dr. Josef Wegner, one of the first archaeologists excavating the site, went on Fox News and said that he thought that it was from the Abydos dynasty. Now, he said this was before it was announced as Userkaf's son, but the difference in time is staggering. My point here is that it's kind of interesting that we're getting really vastly different information. The Abydos dynasty is between the 15th and 16th, like I said. Userkaf is from the 5th dynasty, the first pharaoh of the 5th dynasty. We're talking like 900 years here. We are getting two different stories from official sources on the nature of this find.
Yeah, you're getting two different stories because you're literally mixing up two different stories, you fucking moron. He's basing this entire video on this Fox News article about a tomb of Egyptian royalty behind a false door. That's the first thing he talked about. Then scroll down to the bottom. In an even more significant achievement, an archaeologist from the University of Pennsylvania found the long-lost tomb of an unknown Egyptian pharaoh. Let's click that link to go to a completely different article talking about a completely different site. This one is near Abydos, and this is the second thing Dan is talking about, pretending it's from the same story and talking about the same site. Dan is so goddamn illiterate, and I don't mean science illiterate, just regular illiterate, that he is taking two totally unrelated articles about two totally unrelated sites and pretending that they represent some kind of confusion among archaeologists about the age and nature of the Saqqara site. And of course he just got this crap from Jimmy, who was immediately corrected on Twitter, but why would he or Dan listen to people who aren't complete morons? Hey Dan, are you going to post a retraction video about how you got everything about this story wrong because you're an idiot who can't read? Of course you won't, because you don't care about facts. You don't care about accuracy. You're just a pointless troll peddling an anti-establishment narrative for cash. I just proved it. And you proved it yourself on Twitter, replying to the people pointing out what a fucking idiot you are. You tell other people they're lying, that they're shifting goalposts, and that they should get AIDS. Real classy, Dan. This video has well over 200,000 views, and every single comment is some brain-dead douchebag licking your balls for sticking it to the corrupt establishment archaeologists, when in reality, you're just a fucking moron who can't read. The idea that you can do something like this and still parade around pretending to be a voice for truth is absolutely sickening. You are what's wrong with the world. You are the reason anti-science sentiment is on the rise. You tell the most idiotic lies that can be debunked simply by actually reading the Fox News article you're referencing and understanding how links work, which of course none of your idiot followers do, and then just sit back and enjoy the empty praise with zero concern for how you're poisoning society and polarizing people against experts who actually know what they're talking about. It's revolting. Anyway, let's finish up by talking about something that is described best by a few bits from his first video that I initially skipped, because I thought it would be better addressed at the end of the video. Here's Dan whining about how I have him all wrong, and that he used to be super best pals with Flint, as well as Milo Rossi of Mini Minuteman, that he used to be critical of Graham, and he's just a free-thinking truth seeker who will side with whoever is dishing out the facts.
My very first videos were on Milo Rossi and on Stefan Milo, and I openly disagreed with Graham Hancock right off the bat. I was friends with Milo Rossi almost from day one of me making videos. I was friends with Flint Dibble. I got along well with many archaeologists. Some of my earliest Patreon supporters were archaeologists.
To wrap up this video, I think it's worth making it perfectly clear that Dan has objectively sold out, abandoned any semblance of integrity, latched on to frauds like Graham, and does absolutely nothing now but viciously attack real archaeologists and scientists with zero regard for facts or objectivity, which again makes him nothing but a pointless troll. First, contrary to what Dan now claims, he has never been even remotely neutral. He has never been anything but a Hancock fanboy.
I pre-ordered Fingerprints of the Gods in '95. Like I had it, Hastings had it waiting for me the first day it was available. I'd read The Sign and the Seal a couple of years before that. So I was a Graham Hancock fan like a long time ago.
We're one of the early readers of Fingerprints of the Gods. And that's sort of how you got into this whole subject, right?
Yes, I actually had that one pre-ordered from Hastings because I'd read The Sign and the Seal.
Okay.
So I was already like, Graham Hancock's pretty cool. I like the way he's coming at these things.
You're just a gullible moron who bought Graham's fraudulent narrative hook, line, and sinker. That's all you've ever been.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the first episode of Debunking.
Get absolutely dunked on, Graham Hancock.
Followed Graham Hancock since '94 or so, Fingerprint of the Gods. When that came out, I bought it at Hastings like right away. I was anticipating it. There was a little bit of a buzz, and I grabbed it early on and read it numerous times.
This is your identity. You don't even seem to understand the problem with this, since you've tweeted bragging about all the archaeology textbooks on your bookshelf, even though there are precisely 0 real archaeology books or any textbooks of any kind. This is how delusional you are. You say one thing and show another. You started your channel to pretend to debunk Milo's debunking of Graham. That's it. That's the reason for your channel. You pretend to be neutral to seem more credible, but you aren't, and you never were. You say you used to be friends with Milo and Flint, and that's horseshit. They just didn't treat you with contempt at first because you didn't come out of the gates swinging like a maniac, so for a brief period you were considered less toxic than other pseudoarchaeology enthusiasts.
I do accept the basic premise that I do believe that there most likely was some sort of lost civilization. I'm hard-pressed to pin any of the advanced things that Graham Hancock would pin on it.
That's funny. These days, you just flat-out assert that Graham doesn't make any claims about such advanced aspects. What happened there? What were you specifically referencing but didn't list? Sounds like you fell for Graham's lies, and now that he's brought you into the fold, you've become a revisionist douchebag. All you have to do is look at your first handful of videos to see that you've never been neutral. You've never defended real archaeology. You've never done anything but attack archaeologists and historians and blindly defend Graham's lost civilization with 0 evidence. You played nice with Milo at first to leech off of his internet presence.
And I really also want to thank Milo because, I'll be honest, I was a little hard on him in my video, and, it's to be punchy and so that it was enjoyable, but the guy, he could have just ignored me. He could have used YouTube's whole content system, content ID thing to just slap the crap out of me. He could have sent you guys over here to ratio me into oblivion. But what did he do? He respected the comments that I had, called my video good, told me in private that I had the knack to be a great content creator and that my video was blah, blah, blah. And it was great. It was great.
What a heartwarming story. Did you guys end up together?
Now Milo is very much of the opinion that, well, he unfollowed me even on Instagram when I pointed out to him that as long as, he said that he's disappointed that he feels like I'm not interested in reaching across the aisle.
That's a shame, Dan. I guess that's what happens when you're an asshole. But in general, this whole act about respecting the experts just doesn't fly. You parade around allegedly friendly conversations you have with archaeologists like Mark Brink. You acknowledge that people who pretend the pyramids are electric power plants are idiots, since it gives you a rare chance to flex your one area of modest knowledge. You do these things to cultivate an aura of neutrality, but it's all an act. The moment that Flint proved that Graham is totally full of shit on Rogan, the facade ended, and you completed your metamorphosis into the bridge troll you are today. Claiming Flint taught with illegal indigenous remains at Dartmouth, even though you'd been corrected by multiple people. Countless videos about what a liar Flint is, which are nothing but stacks of lies. And of course doing the same to John Hoops, Mark Boslow, and other other archaeologists, even though Flint is your favorite boogeyman. And the flip-flopping, calling out Jimmy for mocking Flint's cancer, agreeing with Flint that Jimmy spouts Nazi crap, and then later sitting next to Jimmy on multiple large podcasts and greenlighting all of his bullshit. Talking about Gunung Padang and acknowledging that a retracted paper is crap with no artifacts to back up lofty claims, and then later turning around and saying Gunung Padang is a lost civilization and that anyone who disagrees is a bad faith actor. First, justifiably mocking other pseudoarchaeology losers like Uncharted X, who pretend that perfectly made granite vases are signs of lost technology, then making another video flip-flopping and pushing the narrative yourself. You're a sellout, Dan. You've sacrificed even the thin veneer of neutrality you once proudly wore, and have fully embraced the troll lifestyle. And nobody is surprised at all. The more attention you get, the worse you get.
By the time I was 25, I'll go out on a limb. I can say this with confidence. By the time I was 25, I'd studied the pyramids more than both Milo and Flint have at this point in their lives combined. I know a lot about it. Graham Hancock knows a shitload about that stuff.
Yes, Dan, based on you reading shitty books written by Graham Hancock, the lying fraud, you know more about Egypt than Milo or Flint, even though Flint has excavated and taught Egyptian archaeology, and even though you're a fucking idiot who can't get through a Fox News article about Egypt without humiliating yourself. Where does this asshole find the balls to say this stuff? Anyway, that's the abbreviated version of Dan's descent from dim-witted but mild-mannered pseudo-archaeology enthusiast to full-blown piece of shit internet troll. Now let's have a chat with Flint. Hey Flint, thanks for joining us again. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. This situation is still just as surreal as ever.
Surreal and hilarious. Equal parts surreal and hilarious, I'd say. So what do you make of this metamorphosis of Dan, if you can call it that? I don't know. Give me your take of this whole thing, because I'm pretty new to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got to see it in real time. I mean, so did Milo and a few others, but it was just like you could see him go from somebody that was... Look, he was always a pseudo-archaeology Graham Hancock fan, but he was polite about it. And he actually wanted to have a conversation with me and other archaeologists on Twitter. And I mean, X, whatever you want to call it. And, like there was this one time, one of my first conversations with him was he solicited advice on how to define an artifact from archaeologists and to include in a video. And he accurately used our information. I didn't really realize at the time it was meant to shit on Potholer. I also had no clue who Potholer is.
Yeah.
Because I'm only recently getting into this whole YouTube thing.
OG debunker. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but he accurately represented us. And it was after that in like 2023 where I started chatting with him. And, we didn't really always get along. We disagreed on a lot. But he was at least, for the most part, polite. I think the worst insult that he used for me for the first few months was he claimed that I was trying to chase clout by debunking Graham Hancock. And it's like, that's a mild criticism, but
sure.
I think I kind of broke his brain with the debate on Joe Rogan, because one of the things we'd argue about was like, could at least these ideas of Graham Hancock's be sort of plausible? It's not as bad as believing in flat earth. And I'd always tell him, look, no, it is. The evidence is completely against this.
Yeah.
And that upset him. But it was when I went on Rogan and like showed the world how much evidence archaeology has against this, that it just kind of, something snapped in him, and he just immediately started, like over the course of 3 months, he must have produced something like 30 videos about me.
Yeah.
And very harassing and toxic and accusatory and just straight up lying about me. I think you covered in this the Indigenous remains video, where, he first said that as a tweet, and people corrected him. And then he made a video.
And then he put it in
a
a video,
And it's just like, and then 3 months later, somebody, I think it was Bill Farley, pointed out on YouTube how it was just a complete, utter lie. And he likes to retract his lies and try to play the bigger man. And with this one, he said, no, this is wrong, but you know what? I'm going to leave it up because I want to make Flint see what it feels like. And it's just like, this is just
what a ridiculous justification.
And, I think you also show it in this, like, because when we were friendly, he defended me against Jimmy Corsetti, because Jimmy Corsetti started posting these images. They weren't of swastikas. They were of a meander pattern at Balbeck. But he was like, Hitler might have been right, or was Hitler right about ancient history? And I was like, no, you're spouting Nazi bullshit. And the first thing Dan said, because he was sort of communicating with Jimmy too, was like, that is Nazi bullshit. I don't think you're a Nazi, but like, you can understand that this looks like Nazi bullshit. And then Jimmy's reply was to lie about my cancer, to claim I was faking it. And then Dan called him out really badly, saying, how dare you do this kind of thing? Even on his YouTube and Twitter, he was calling him out. And then, you know what? After the debate, now he goes on fucking Rogan with Jimmy Corsetti and sits next to him as Jimmy
and other
Corsetti.
Podcasts. Yeah, they're frickin' frack now. They're thick as thieves, those two. Yeah, it really is funny to me. I mean, in the pseudoarchaeology timeline, there's clearly a before Hancock v. Dibble and after Hancock v. Dibble. It's just like, it just really was that devastating. And the whole community was just like, we need to invent this alternate reality where Dibble is a lying fraud and the devil. And that's the narrative that they chose. And so I'm late to the game here. I just became really kind of aware of the intricacies of this little community, not, this year really. And I'm utterly fascinated by it. But just as with everything else, like when I start to dig into like kind of like creationists that are hyped up as very intellectual, like any of these little communities where it's like, oh no, we're like the smart version of this or whatever. As soon as I dig into it, I just see how unbelievably stupid they are. Like this, in this video, I'm talking about the last video that Dan put out where he literally can't even read an article and he's two completely different. I'm just like, how is anyone listening to this guy? He's so fucking dumb. It's like just bottom of the barrel stupid. Like, it's unbelievable.
People point out he's wrong and he says, no, it wasn't me misreading. It was Fox News that got it wrong. And it's like, no, Fox News didn't get it wrong. It just linked to a video on a related
It's a link to another
the article. Like, it's like, you're an idiot. And he's going to put out a retraction, I bet, where he blames Fox News rather than his own lack of ability to read the stuff.
Yeah, it's like even if the Fox article, even if he wants to blame it on like how it was organized or something, they're still two completely different sites. They're different names of different sites in different places. Like, what are you doing, man? It's just, I can't even believe it.
And you're presenting yourself to hundreds of thousands of people and claiming Egyptologists lie, and this is the evidence for it. And you don't even do the fucking basic little research of tracking down any information. You just crank out a video full of bullshit. I mean, but you know what? I've learned something from this. One is that this is how these conspiracy theorists work. They want to focus on evidence until you use enough evidence to prove them wrong, and then they attack your character because they have nothing else to do. And it's just, that's their nature, is to poison the well and to, accuse us of lying or covering up evidence. And that's all they got.
I mean, it's that and delusion. Like in the video, he calls me science illiterate multiple times. It's like, dude, I have multiple degrees. I taught organic chemistry at university. Like, I'm not pretending I'm like this brilliant scientific mind. I teach science. I know science. I teach science. He says on Piers Morgan that he knows more about Egyptology than you. You've excavated and taught Egypt. It's like, where do they get the balls? Like, it's this Trumpian post-truth. If I say it, it's true, no matter how idiotic it is. Like, it's really poisoning the social discourse that just people feel emboldened to make up anything they want, say it confidently on like a big podcast or something, and then just the minions lap it up. It's just like, it's really depressing, man. I gotta be honest. Yeah.
There's something off with our social media world where it promotes this right now, and this is the discourse, and I don't know, like, one thing that struck me in his video that I think we should debunk right now is he claimed that I paid you to make that video. And I want to be really clear and honest here. I did help you with some of your research.
Yeah, of course.
I helped you with some of your research for this video. But you know what? The opposite is true. You actually offered to pay me to do that, and I declined.
Yeah, because I pay scriptwriters. So, I mean, I feel like that's fair.
And so, like, it's the exact opposite. But they want to make it so as if it's like, this kind of thing. And
I'm being puppeted by the cabal of archaeologists.
It's like, dude, I make good money on my AdSense. Like, I got pretty good money from that piece, and that's not the prime motivation. I mean, obviously, I have to make a living, but I just really, really enjoy lifting up these rocks and exposing this disgusting underbelly. It's great, man. And you're also not the only person that I spoke with. I mean, you were the one in the debate, so you're going to be the best person to talk to about the specifics of the things you brought up in the debate. But I'm talking to other people and historians and stuff. If I see, I need a little more information on this. Over the years, I've become so much more diligent by absolute necessity about reaching out to experts in their various fields. When I'm debunking really, really niche molecular biology or anthropology or whatever it is, I have to talk to experts in the field because I'm not one. So I have a good working understanding as a generalist, but if I need some really niche specific information, I must speak to experts, and that's how science communicators have to operate. So,
and I mean, that's how experts have to operate. I'm working on a video right now debunking the claims about Homo naledi. So I had Gutsit Gibbon on. I had three other paleoanthropologists that I talked with. And so it's like, I have plenty of experience in paleoanthropology. My dad was one. I've worked on these projects for decades. But I still am reaching out to my colleagues that know more about these kind of specifics.
Yeah.
And so that's just life. You have to acknowledge that we only know so much, and to do a proper research job, we reach out to other people. That's doing a good job.
It's really exciting and invigorating to me because I feel like the situation we're in right now at this very moment is that the sphere of intellectuals are kind of really starting to come around to how big a problem this is, how big a problem anti-intellectualism is, and we're finally reacting in synergy. More people are becoming science communicators. More academics are realizing that they need to either be science communicators or collaborate with science communicators. It's just we're starting to see a more coordinated and emphatic response to the science deniers, and I'm here for it, man. Let's go.
I'm with you. I hope you saw my Archaeology Wars video, because the first half was about how crazy this cult around this beliefs in pseudoarchaeology are, but the second half was a direct call to my colleagues to say, hey, we have to come and speak up and be strategic about this. We need to work with people like you, Milo, other science communicators, but we also have to do it ourselves. And we have to get our kind of discourse out into the public and stop being blocked off from the public, because we're just locked out of it. I mean, Joe Rogan won't have me back on. Lex Friedman has ghosted me. It's like, what else am I going to do except to keep pushing for airtime?
That's right. Take it into your own hands. That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate everything, and I'm sure we'll be speaking more. And it's not the last time my viewers will hear from you too, because there's plenty of these other figures to tear through. So we'll be talking more soon.
Let's do it. Like I said to you before, I want to have you on for a live stream at some point.
Yeah,
talk
absolutely.
Strategies.
Anytime.
All right, sounds good.
Take her easy.
See ya.
And thanks, Flint. The educated part of the internet is with you. You have to wonder what keeps Dan going. The promise of another pat on the head from Graham? The couple grand a month in AdSense revenue? Honestly, probably yes to both. He doesn't strike me as someone who has a lot going for him, so this is probably all he's got. It would be a shame if those things were ruined for him by all of his loser fans finally realizing what a pathetic lying fraud he is, huh? And when I say loser fans, good lord do I really mean it. I deal with flat earthers, creationists, anti-vaxxers, you name it, but the jerks in this pseudo-archaeology cult really are some of the most insufferable wastes of human life on the internet. Honestly, that's the main reason I've chosen to keep hammering this topic. That's how toxic this cult is. I'm going to obliterate each and every one of their loser fraud heroes until this trend dies. Dan some more? Maybe. Jimmy? Definitely. Still other douchebags? Perhaps. We'll just have to see how this continues to unfold. So that's it for Dan Richards, the most pointless troll in the pseudo-archaeology cult. He says he probably won't make any more content about me, which would be the smart thing to do. Not as smart as not making this first video, though, and nowhere near as smart as not being a pointless troll who lies for a living. But grifters aren't that smart, you see. Anyway, there's lots more bullshit to expose, so I'll see you next time.